Well, hello and welcome to CMB's April webinar. My name is John Wood. I'm the Communications and Member Services Manager for CMB. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm so glad you're here. But I'd also love to know your name and where you're checking in from. So if you'll use the chat just to say hello, I can't wait to see our community that's gathering together. Now, I do want to make sure that we highlight today is going to be a really special focus because we're going to be diving into the topic near and dear to our heart called Why Radio Still Wins. So we're going to be looking at how listeners actually use digital streaming platforms and with a solid strategy, how you can leverage radio's uniqueness to serve them and to reach them. So grateful to Matt Stockman. He's the brand director of Pillar Media. He's going to be joining us in just a moment to lead our conversation. But before we dive in, I got to make sure that you know all the latest updates from CMB because you got to be in the know. You don't want to be dealing with FOMO later on. Let's kick things off by taking a look at something that's an investment in you, memberships. If you haven't purchased your 2026 CMB membership yet, there is no better time than the present. From connections and training to resources, event discounts, and more, it's an investment that you can benefit from all year long. So you see the prices listed there. Gold membership is $14.99. It includes complimentary registration for all CMB events throughout the year. Plus, you also get exclusive opportunities like the Gold Member Gathering and the Gold Member Breakfast at Momentum, as well as our full library of digital resources. Now, a silver membership's nothing to sneeze at either. It's only $309 for the year, and it gives you the best deals on registering for upcoming events at the lowest rates, plus access to those amazing digital resources. And I tell you what, if you want to take care of it today, just cross off your list. I'll send you the link. All you have to do is text the keyword member to 72747. That's member to 72747. Coming up in just a couple of weeks, like 6, which I'm pretty sure the CMB team just had heart palpitations when I said that, is Momentum. We can't wait. It's going to be absolutely amazing this year. We're going to dive into the theme greater than because we believe what's ahead is greater than what's behind. So let's get ready for it together. No better place to do it than Christian music's biggest family reunion. So registration's open. And again, if you haven't registered yet, I want to give you a pro tip. You will save money by becoming either a gold or silver member. So if you want to go ahead and take care of that right now, you can actually text the keyword momentum to that same number, 72747, and you'll get the link to go ahead and get registered. That's momentum to 72747. And last but certainly not least, we're super excited about the 2026 CMB Special Awards. Voting is open right now for all current CMB members to let their voice be heard. But voting ends next Monday, April 13th. So if you haven't done it, it's not too late, but we only got a couple of days left. So knocking it out, probably not a bad idea. You should have received an email already with the link to vote. If you haven't, or if you're having any trouble getting in and doing it, please let me know. I'd be glad to help. You can email me, John, Jon, at cmbonline.org. Also, if you become a member between now and then, you can vote too. So just another reason to join the family. All right, it's time to dive into our topic today. Before we do that, though, again, if you haven't checked in yet with your name and where you're checking in from, I highly encourage you to do that in the chat. As we go throughout the webinar today, feel free to post your questions. We'll keep track of them. And if at the end of our time together, we've got time to go through them, we will do so, and we'll get to as many as we can. So without further ado, I want to welcome Matt Stockman to join me on screen now. Matt, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Can't wait to hear what you got.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. And I got to be honest, your setup and preview of what I was going to be bringing today was, I think, way more impressive than the actual presentation that I have. So now I feel like there's a little bit of pressure on. Before I dive into what I've got for you today, I do need to just sort of address the elephant in the room. About 3.5 weeks ago, I came down with some sort of a flu viral-ish thing, which for a guy who's usually never been sick for more than 48 hours in his whole life, I'm still trying to get over it. So if you hear some awkwardness in my voice, or I pause at some point during the presentation, just realize I have a mute button here on my microphone. So if I end up having a cough or whatever, I'm going to mute. So if I just disappear for a moment, that's probably why. And I appreciate your grace when it comes to just getting through this. I do want to share my screen with you because I've got about 212 slides that we need to try to get through. That's not entirely true, but I do have some stuff that I want to share with you and some questions to really dive into and hopefully give you some practical insights at the end of this as well, and maybe even leave some time for questions if we have it. But obviously, the topic of our talk today and our time together is why radio still wins. And in order for us to sort of address the core question, the big issue that I think we want to dive into today, I need to take you through about 60 to 90 seconds of history to kind of set up the right kind of context. And this really begins with us going back to uh, prior to 2000 in the early days of radio, and there may be some people on screen who can remember back this far besides me. In the days before 2000, really music discovery for people happened primarily on radio, and then followed up with family and friends. If you ever made a mixtape for somebody, that's how we shared music with family and friends back in the day. But prior to 2000, it was really all about radio. That's how you learned about new songs, you learned about new artists, all the way back to when a person could 50 or 60 years ago walk into a radio station with a 45 RPM record, give it to the DJ. The DJ would walk into the studio and play it on the radio, and that person would become a star. Fast forward to about 2000, 2001, the first two digital service platforms that provided music sharing came on the scene. That was Napster and Pandora. Spotify uh, became a thing about 4 or 5 years later in 2006. And then Apple Music, as we know it, now came into play in around 2015. So that was the catalyst for bringing us to where we are today, where family and friends today is still a huge source of music discovery. But obviously, you know that now people are discovering music on digital platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Spotify and Apple Music, etc. And that has changed the way people look towards radio for music discovery. As a matter of fact, earlier this week, the Jacobs Media Tech Survey came out that showed that only about 29% of people still consider radio as their number one source of music discovery. It's all these other things now where people are discovering music, which doesn't mean we still don't have an opportunity to win and push forward and to make a difference in the lives and the hearts of people, especially in their music discovery. It just means that the landscape has changed, and the landscape is going to continue to change. But back 25 years ago, when Napster and Pandora and all these digital platforms for music sharing started to pop up, there was a lot of tension over the future of radio, because radio is linear, meaning we can only play one thing on the radio at a time. There's no control for the user or for the listener of the radio signal. It's you and I that get to control what they listen to, and we're curating the entire experience for them. And then on the other side, digital media, of course, offers control for people to create their own playlists, to skip songs, to find songs on demand, to thumbs up and thumbs down. And the argument was, or the tension was, back 25 years ago, and maybe even to a certain degree today as well, that these things like the nonlinear, the complete control for the user, their ability to self-curate their own playlist, would somehow or other send the barriers of radio, meaning linear and no control, and we curate it, you don't get to curate it, into an early grave. Which really brings us to the core problem that I think we're going to land on and talk about today. This tension between the restrictions of radio, the linear listening experience, and the no control, and it's all created by somebody else, and the freedoms of digital music providers, meaning nonlinear, so users can bounce around, can skip songs, can listen to stuff on demand. They have lots of control. They self curate their entire experience. That somehow this tension is something that we need to resolve. And it brings us to this question today, which is where the rest of what I have to share with you today is going to land. How can radio overcome the objections of digital platform first music fans and make radio their preferred choice? One more time. How can radio overcome the objections of a digital platform first music fan and make radio their preferred choice? Well, I think in order for us to get to that point, we should do a little compare and contrast between what radio station programming looks like and then how most people use digital platforms. We'll do the radio side first. This is a bit of a generalization, but for the most part, most current based music radio stations, their playlist looks something like this: 40 to 50 titles, either in current or recurrent rotation. Again, your numbers may vary a little bit, but between 150 and 250 titles in gold categories. And then for most current based music radio stations, they have 15 to 20 core artists. Oh, why is that? Sorry. I just hear the word, you can't see the presentation. Stand by. Guys, the screens were so epic that I'm the images and all the stuff that I put on here. I almost want to go back and share them all with you, all right at first. I won't do that though. So anyway, this is, now that you can see it, and I hope you can, most current based radio stations kind of look something like this. Now, that's the radio side of things. Let's talk about how most people use digital platforms now as well. Again, this is kind of a deep dive into research on playlist habits first and foremost, and then individual users of platforms like Apple Music and Spotify. And if you do some of that research and you discover what it reveals is the average digital platform user has on average 66 titles in their playlist. Now it can range from as few as 5 or 6 to as many as 250 or more. What's really interesting is for many people on digital platforms, they have between 300 and 1,000 or more songs that they've saved that have less than one play. So in other words, they favorited a lot of music, but there's nobody who's actually listening to the music. They just have them in their queue someplace, but it's not getting any attention whatsoever. And the average digital platform user has between 5 and 15 core artists in their playlist. I think you can probably see where I'm going with this, but if you compare radio and the way most music radio stations are programmed and a digital user and how they actually use the platform and the behavior of how they use the platform, there's a lot more similarities, I think, than there is differences. 40 to 50 titles on a radio station in current or recurrent. The average digital user has 66 titles in their playlist. 250 titles in gold categories, their playlist might max out at around 250 titles. 15 to 20 core artists in an average radio station playlist, 5 to 15 core artists in a radio station playlist. So here's the reality of it. It's a lot more the same than it is different, which brings us to the reality of people actually like the illusion of choice and the illusion of control rather than the actual choice or control. Back when digital service providers became popular and came on the scene, everyone thought that digital platforms would allow users to save 10,000 plus songs and have this diverse and ever expanding music palette. But when you actually dive into the actual behavior of the average digital platform user, what people really have in their digital platforms is more like their own radio station playlist that, in my opinion, looks an awful lot like the radio station playlist that you're programming. So if choice is illusion more than necessity, but there are certain elements of choice like skippability and increasing and accessing favorites on demand that are things that we actually can't really win at in radio. How can we outprogram the illusion of choice that platforms like Spotify provide? And if you're the decision maker at your radio station, what do you do? And it comes down to this. I think we have to give listeners what they can't get anyplace else. And so I'm going to give you now, for the rest of our time together, I'm going to give you a bunch of different ideas, some practical, some a little bit more theoretical. Some of this is going to be things that I think you'll be able to implement. Maybe some are things that you're already implementing at your stations, which would be great. Some I feel like will probably push the boundaries a little bit and maybe push you into area that you're 100% not comfortable with, and that's okay as well. But what I like to do is just go, okay, if we're going to give listeners what they can't get anyplace else, what does that actually look like and sound like? And the first thing I want to encourage everyone to do is that at the top of our list, and if you're really specifically in music programming or you're program director of your station, at the top of our list is I think we really need to seriously consider loosening our approach on our music playlists. That means just looking at the way that we have maybe done things in the past in terms of our current music rotation and adjusting or tweaking how we approach this. Kenny J's presentation at Momentum this past year really alluded to this, and I learned a lot during that presentation. I hope you were able to see it. And some of what I'm going to show you right here, I think applies. Honestly, I got from Kenny and have implemented at our stations as well. This is what a typical current radio rotation structure looks like. And again, your numbers may be different. You may have 10 power currents, you may have 5 power currents, you may have 10 mediums or 10 lights, or the numbers may be different. So this is again sort of just a across the board average landscape of what most current music radio station rotation structures look like. At the top of those 7 power currents, these are the heavy songs. These are the heavy hitters. These are the ones that are rock solid, that need to get the most attention. And that's not really an area to sort of experiment with. But Kenny's argument, and I think there's value in it, is your medium currents and your light currents. There is a lot of flexibility and there is a lot of opportunity to, in a way, be more real-time reactive to what is happening in your community, who's coming to town to perform nearby, what you're doing promotionally, so on and so forth. And it feels like there was old school thinking, which I raise my hand and say I was one of the people who really ascribed to this for many, many years, that if we weren't committed to a song for 20 or 25 weeks, that we would never consider adding a song. And I think the songs that end up in heavy current in our rotation should be songs that were committed to 20 or 25 weeks, because the research has told us that these are the songs that people love. But as an example, last summer, we produced some video content with our discipleship program that was based around Josh Baldwin's song, Made for More. Huge hit, was a long time in heavy. But by the time that video content had come out, that song was already done. It was in a recurrent category at that point. But for the few weeks that we were promoting that content, we moved that song back into the regular rotation. In the past, I'm not sure I would have ever considered that, but it really worked and helped for us to have a platform to be able to promote that content. So the flexibility that there is in the medium currents and the light currents in your radio station might be an opportunity for you to be able to give listeners more of what they can't get anyplace else. Now, I've got a bunch of other ideas here, and it says at the top, 7 ways to outprogram Spotify. And really what it is 7 ways to give listeners what they want that they can't get anyplace else. And again, there's going to be a lot of really practical ideas, and we're going to push a few boundaries here. And of course, if you have questions, I would encourage you to put them in the chat at some point or another, and hopefully we'll have time to dig into some of these a little bit later on. But the first one is researching your playlist. We have to make sure that we are playing the songs that people are loving the most frequently. Keep in mind the average time spent listening to your radio station or my radio station, any radio station, averages between 10 and 14 minutes. So it's a really short window of time. So the songs that are happening in any 15-minute segment, quarter-hour segment on your station have got to be the right songs. And I think in order for this to sort of reach its logical conclusion, one of the things that we need to sort of put to bed once and for all is what I believe are the issues that we have with traditional music research. Now, you may be raising your hand right now and saying, but Matt, I didn't know we had a problem with traditional music research. Well, I think we do. And here's how I'm going to explain it to you. Um, I've got a few bullets that will sort of walk it out for you. I think across the board, if you were to talk to program directors and music directors at pretty much every radio station across the country, one of the things we're struggling with our online music research testing is declining sample size. It's getting harder and harder and harder to get people to take the tests and get enough people in demo that you feel like the research is solid. And then the demographics of the people inside your music panel are, I think, skewed. Mark Ramsey had a really great piece a few weeks ago about this. Hopefully you read it. He basically said the premise of it was that a lot of radio station music teams, maybe yours, that he has seen through his research is that basically those music teams are filled with a lot of donors, sometimes 25, 30, 40, 50% of the music team is people who give money to the radio station. And his premise is the people who are the most resistant to anything changing on your radio station are the people who are giving you money, most likely. So that in and of itself is skewing the music data that you are getting because those people are the most inclined to want to keep things the way they are. So that said, you go, well, how do you know that? Well, this is where the crux of the problem is that we consistently see top 10 songs on radio charts that we can't find the data story in any streaming data anywhere. So, and meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, so we see songs that look like they're in the top 10 mega hits on radio, but then when you try to go look for supporting data on the streaming side that says, yes, people in fact do like that song, you can't find the data. So, which points to me that the issue might be with the declining sample size and the skewed demographics. So, all that to say, and this is a similar problem if you are familiar with the way Nielsen works and you're familiar with a new platform that's making a lot of buzz these days called DTS AutoStage. Juan from Xperia has presented at Momentum in different CMB events about DTS AutoStage before. Nielsen is a small sample size that's meant to represent a larger population. So the number of meter holders in New York City, for example, is between 4,000 and 5,000. The population in New York City is 19 million people. So it's the listening habits of 4,000 or 5,000 people that we're supposed to extrapolate into audience estimates for the New York market. Meanwhile, on the DTS AutoStage side, the number of cars enabled with DTS AutoStage in New York City is over 250,000. So it's 250,000 data points, or it's 4,000 or 5,000 data points to create the best audience estimate. And to a certain degree, that's the same problem that we're having, I think, on the traditional music research is we have declining sample sizes, and yet we have streaming data, which is infinitely more data points telling a different story about the songs that we're playing. So my encouragement to you and what we've done at Pillar Media is consider strongly reinvesting in data that reflects audience behavior in your market rather than opinion about music in your market. Okay, so that's enough of that. Research your playlist. That's got to be first and foremost. If we're going to give listeners more of what they want that they can't get anyplace else. Then the next thing I want to encourage is people to use the margins to your advantage. Now, you may be asking, what does that mean? Brands use their margins to experiment all the time. This is the equivalent of your favorite neighborhood spot doing dollar taco night and trivia on Tuesdays. The prime real estate for a restaurant, no question, is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Tuesday night at most restaurants is sort of a margin for them. So they put things like Taco Tuesday and trivia on Tuesday night to hopefully draw a crowd and to expand their margin a little bit. It's the same thing with late night happy hour. You'll see where restaurants after 9 o'clock, they'll have food and drink specials. It's because they stay open till 11, but they realize that everybody bugs out of the restaurant by 8:30. And so after 9 o'clock is margin for them. So what does that mean for you and I and for what we do in our radio stations? Well, leveraging our margins, if you look at, and this little graph is just basically just Monday through Sunday, 12A to 11:59 p. And all of the light green area is the non-prime hours that I would say are margin for us. The white area, 5A to 8P, and yours might be a little bit different. That's the prime area. That's where a lot of high cum, high turnover, and really that's where you got to be rock solid. But there's plenty of space in our weekly clock that we have what I would call margin. And there's margin through all throughout your brand as well, not just in the off sort of non-prime hours on your radio station. If you can put on-demand content on your website, that's margin. If you have additional streams, or you can start a couple of additional streams, that's margin. We'll talk a little bit more about how to use those in just a minute. When I did this deep dive just a couple of days ago into the brand Dr. Pepper, everybody knows what Dr. Pepper is. Do you realize that they have 16 different flavors of Dr. Pepper in all, if you consider all the caffeine-free versions and the zero sugar versions? But they have blackberry, cherry vanilla, strawberries and cream, the regular one. So all these different combinations. A brand like Dr. Pepper, when they introduce these sort of adjacent flavors, their goal is to not convert somebody who can't stand Dr. Pepper into fans. In other words, they're not trying to convert a P4 or a P5 of Dr. Pepper into a P1. But what they are trying to do is work their margins. They're trying to find somebody who might be a P2 of Dr. Pepper and offer them an adjacent offering that might make them a P1, or offer a P1 of Dr. Pepper, a new flavor that would result in a second or maybe even a third purchase. That is using your margins. And we have margins inside our brand to give listeners what they can't get anyplace else. Okay, so let's dive into a few more things. Create brand exclusive experiences. Here's what I mean by this. Artist exclusive limited run streams, blowing up your weekend programming in order to do something special for a big concert or a special event that's happening in your town. The artist exclusive limited run streams that I was talking about before, this is akin to what SiriusXM will do, where if you dive into SiriusXM, what they'll do from time to time is they will put up a channel for a limited run that will be like the all Bruce Springsteen channel or the all Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers channel, and it will feature interview clips and deep cuts and live versions of stuff. And it's really just like a 13-hour programming loop that they just play over and over and over again. What about creating something like that for a big special event that you have, or a big album release for a core artist for your station that you offer as a stream? You build that content. Artist takeovers as well could be a brand exclusive experience. I stole this idea from Z100 in New York City when I lived in New Jersey. This is probably not their idea, but basically it was the height of COVID. And on a Saturday afternoon, they would have one of their core artists. Basically, now I knew it was all pre-recorded, but it just sounded really great because it sounded like one of their core artists was broadcasting on the station from their living room. And the audio quality wasn't that great, but they were talking about how they were sort of making it through COVID, and they would share some new music and stuff like that. But it was just an experience that you're not going to get anyplace else. So basically, the way I did it was I reached out to a partner at a record label. I said, "Hey, we want to have Way the Kingdom or Chris Tomlin do an artist takeover for a while." We sent him sort of the run of shows, so to speak. Told them what we needed them to record. They did all the parts on their phone. They sent us the audio. We cut it up. We produced it, and it sounded like Chris Tomlin took over the radio station for a couple hours on a Saturday afternoon. That was a really simple fix and a really great thing that you can't, that listeners can't necessarily get anyplace else. How about this? Even a listener takeover as well. If you have a fan of your radio station that's got a pretty healthy social media following, with wisdom, invite that person to do the same thing and record a bunch of content, put it on the weekend, and let it be a listener takeover. All right. We could go on and on. You've got your own ideas as far as that, but huge opportunity here to give listeners what they can't get anyplace else by creating brand exclusive experiences. This next bullet point might be the most important bullet point in the whole slide deck. Doubling down on community. Be as human as you can and be as connected to your people as you can. There is a groundswell of disdain for digital audio providers right now, especially among Gen Z, for two reasons. Most of Gen Z doesn't love the way that platforms like Spotify and Apple Music are treating artist royalty payments. The fact that an artist has got to get a bazillion streams in order to make $10 doesn't set well with Gen Z. So there's a move away from supporting the digital platforms to begin with, which is great for us. The other reason that there's this just disdain for what they do is among Gen Z in particular, and you probably feel a sense of this as well, there's a mass exodus away from algorithms and anything algorithm based. So person to person contact, person to person communication, and curation will win. Community and growing community and doubling down on community is something that Spotify and Apple Music just cannot win at. And you have a huge opportunity right there. All right, next one. Curate content for listeners. This is a little bit of a slower burn, meaning this, you can't do this overnight, but I think we can get here. When you're paying close attention to the streaming data in your market, which is essentially real time or very close to real time within a week, that data is going to show you what the earliest adopters in your community are gravitating towards. And when you use that with wisdom, you can begin to put yourself and your radio station on the front end of introducing new music to your community. Over time, your brand develops the reputation of being the music tastemakers, the ones who are curating what your audience needs to and wants to hear. You're sort of riding on the back of the streaming data to get ahead of what the mass population is going to find out about and be into. I would much rather them find out about that and fall in love with it on your radio station than fall in love with it on Spotify and hear it 6 months later on your radio station. All right, next one. Promote feedback opportunities. Whether this is your music team, this is the opportunity for people to thumbs up and thumbs down content on your app. Access to real humans inside your building behind the scenes who will listen to listeners' opinions and ideas about music. Because this, the one thing that Apple Music and Spotify doesn't really have is customer service. So what I'm really advocating is you're promoting great customer service and feedback loops that one, you're paying attention to, and two, that you're closing the loop on for listeners. It doesn't take long for a handful of listeners to feel like their voice was heard before that idea starts to spread like wildfire. And now you are giving listeners something that they can't get anyplace else. And then the last one is obviously no secret, but such an important ingredient is growing and developing your on-air talent. What happens between the songs is the thing that marks your station more strongly than anything else and identifies your brand and is the great normalizer for for people who are now just experiencing your song, your music or your station for the first time is the one thing that can sound familiar in a whole lot of unfamiliar. So doubling down, growing, investing in coaching for your talent, growing your talent, allowing them to be personalities in 3 dimensions in front of your radio audience will be again something that listeners cannot get anyplace else and will make you the preferred choice over any digital service provider at any point at any time. So in the end, this is kind of where I want to wrap up. Spotify gives people songs, which is fine. We give people stories, surprises, and shared moments. And that's what makes radio indispensable. And it's why radio still wins. That's all I have for you, John. I'd love to have you come back on screen. If you want the deck, if it's useful to you at all, um, feel free to just drop me an email. I'm happy to share this with you. Um, and yeah, if there's anything that we that I didn't get to, or you have more questions or need more clarity on that we can't talk about in the few minutes that we have together, please just reach out to me. I'm happy to follow up by email with with you individually.
Matt, awesome stuff, man. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for taking the time to put this together. True champ too for pushing through. Voice
I
held
know.
up well. Well
Again,
done.
apologies for the voice. I know it was I've had people praying, and if you compare what it sounded like today to a week ago, man, I sound like a dream. But anyway,
No, you did great, man. And Kara wanted to be sure to share with you too. If you need any hot tea or something, we're good to let you take a second to get it. So
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
we did get a couple of questions I'd love to
Okay.
get to real quick if we can. Matt, one person asked this: how do you reconcile that tension between declining or skewed music research that does include some demographic information compared to streaming that doesn't necessarily provide that demographic info we're used to seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is it's not as easy as just going, you know what? I'm abandoning the old music research and I'm just going straight headlong into the digital data because the streaming data, the one thing that you don't get is the demographic information. On the flip side of that, though, for most people, you can, or for most platforms, will allow you to drill into streaming data in your market, and the numbers overall are so large and the data points are so numerous that it's a safe assumption that your listeners are in that data, right? So, but what I think and this is how we're using it right now in our New Jersey station and in our Cincinnati station, is we're using the streaming data as either a bit of a tiebreaker or maybe just to help us sort of guide what happens to a song after it comes out of sort of the current cycle. And it's played for 1,200 spins and heavy, and now we got to decide what to do with it or whatever. We're really digging into the streaming data to tell, hey, or have people turned loose of this song yet or not? And that may inform where that song ends up in our playlist, or if it goes to hold or goes to rest for a while. So what I think is the answer to the question is I think you've got to look for ways to strategically start to. It's kind of we're turning the Titanic, so you have to do it a little bit at a time, right? So
Right.
starting to use the influence of that information to guide some decisions, and then test it. See what kind of response, feedback you're getting, see what kind of whatever anecdotal or stat data that you can look at, digital, streaming data or whatever of your own platforms to kind of see is this moving the needle at all in any direction?
Yeah. Maybe a quick follow-up to that, Matt. Someone's asking if you have an example of some tools that you use, things that have helped you with streaming data and gathering some of that info.
Yeah. So the platform that we use, and there's a couple of options, meaning like this is not the only game in town. The platform that we use is a platform called Luminate, which is I think you've heard other people talk about that. Kenny may have even talked about that during his momentum presentation. But the thing I love about this is that it's market specific. So I can look at what streaming content and what's streaming and what's working and not working on the streaming side in Denver. I can look at it what it is in Cincinnati. I can look at what it is in New Jersey or New York City, and I can see specifically how people are interacting with those songs. There is a cost to it, but again, I go back to the illustration between Nielsen and DTS Auto Stage, right? Is like you have a resource that has skewed demographics, and we're struggling with sample size, and so it's a few data points. And I'm not saying it's not valuable. But you have this other source that has zillions of data points. Which one over time, should we start to be looking towards probably more seriously and more significantly? I think it's the one with the higher number of data points.
That's good. That's really good. Matt, this might be our last question before we wrap
Okay.
up today. We're going to switch gears a little bit to on-demand content. So, question here: can you share a bit more about why it draws the listener to our brand when it relates to creating on-demand content versus just providing them another place to go get content?
I think I understand the question. And again, we may differ in philosophy as far as this goes, but I think in the end, if I can get a listener to come inside the orbit or the atmosphere of my brand, whether it's they're listening to something that we've provided on demand on a web page, or they're streaming one of our streams, or they're listening to a terrestrial, one of the stations, the longer I can have them inside my brand, the better. I don't, I'm sure if you look inside the world of Apple, I'm sure there's competition between the people who are driving the marketing for the iPhone and the people who are driving the marketing for the iPad and the people who are driving the marketing for the Apple Watch. But in the end, as long as you're in the Apple atmosphere, I don't think anybody's that concerned, right? And so I would much rather have you spending time inside our orbit, so to speak, accessing content that is meaningful to you, and it's something that you can't get anyplace else. Because what I think I'm going to try to do is somewhere in there, in a creative way, is always try to point you to another thing that's inside our orbit. So at the end of that podcast or whatever that you listen to, there's going to be an offer for you to go find something else that's also inside the sort of the atmosphere, the ecosphere of our brand.
Hmm.
That
That's
makes
good.
sense?
It does. It does. Cross promotion. I feel like we've talked about
Yeah.
that in radio
Yeah.
before, right?
Yeah. I could have just said cross promotion.
No,
Anyway,
that's great,
yes,
Matt.
that's what I mean.
That's really good, man. And hey, we've had some people who have some other questions.
Okay.
We have your email address here. Is it mstockman@pillarmedia.com? Folks if
That
they want to reach
works.
out to you.
Yes. Yep. mstockman@pillarmedia.com. Please reach out. Yeah, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. Or if you want to copy the deck, just let me know.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you so much. Always good
Thank
to
you.
hear from you. Appreciate
Yeah,
you sharing
appreciate it.
today.
Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you as well for you joining our webinar today. We know you're busy, you've got a full schedule, but you've made time to be here. And we cannot wait to see you at our upcoming events with Momentum. If you want any more information about memberships, Momentum resources, or even our next webinar, which is the All Things Momentum webinar, it's going to give you all the behind the scenes look at Momentum. That's going to be on Wednesday, May 13th. You can find all the stuff at cmbonline.org. Thanks again so much for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of yours.